Hello, lovies. Happy Sunday. It is September 1st and it is Labor Day weekend. I just wanted to thank you guys for joining me today and for, a pretty interesting and a very in-depth legal show with our favorite attorney, Mr. Mark Bederow, when he let me know last night via DM that he was home, guys, from vacation. I said, shall we dance? And he said, tango or foxtrot. Okay, I'll take it till the end of time with me. So we are going to go over today, guys, Sandra Burchmore's affidavit for the federal affidavit, rather, for Matthew Farwell, the disgraced Stoughton police officer who participated in unspeakable crimes against Sandra as a young girl and into her adulthood. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an FYI that we are going to be touching on some topics that could be disturbing for some of you, and we are not going to go into reading all 45 pages of that affidavit, but we will be touching on, child sexual abuse and really, really difficult matters. So if this isn't the one for you, I completely understand. And, take care of yourself, and we love your faces. Okay. And now the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Attorney Mark Bederow.
I'm listening to that introduction and I'm thinking whiskey tango foxtrot. What's going on? Jesus.
I should have thrown, yes, we could have, but we were just, we were ready to dance today, Mr. Bederow, because you came back, and I think that you having a chance to review everything, I mean, did you do it while you were down on vacation too? A little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, not as in-depth as one might do if they were directly involved, but I certainly followed the news, read some of the stuff that was filed. It's, pretty bad, as you can imagine. The allegations are gross. They're really chilling, really disturbing. And it's astounding how this was labeled a suicide with what appears to be such little investigation, which sounds pretty par for the course, unfortunately, in that area of the country these days.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely want to touch on that with you, Mark, when we get a little bit further along, because for me, I mean, I previously have gone into a lot of concerns that there have been with the Office of Chief Medical Examiner in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where they have almost lost their accreditation several times. And there is some procedures, policies that, in my opinion, are really hindering the gold standard of care. And, it's very telling to me, because seeing the affidavit, seeing that indictment, we saw that it was all there, right? It was all there had they chose to look for it.
Yeah, and some of it is just basic common sense. I mean, when you think about somebody who is alleged to have killed themselves, you saw so many things here which appeared to show Sandra Burchmore planning events for her life, appearing optimistic about having a child, and also doing very mundane things which are not proof positive one way or the other about what someone's future intent might be. But I mean, the thing that struck me as just, what are we doing here, is her laundry. I know that sounds like one of those little things. I get all Columbo with little things, but the idea that somebody who is distraught and about to commit suicide would change the laundry and have it running at that time, or order DoorDash right before, it just doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. These communications with her friends and family about, planning for the baby, all this stuff, you put it together and you would have thought that even without the scientific evidence, which is disturbing, and, you would understand that better than I would with your background. But you look at that all together and you say, how did this become a suicide so quickly, and we haven't even touched upon the fiasco as related to the phone extractions or lack of extraction, which once those messages became clear to the federal investigators, you'd have to think that they literally fell out of their seat because it's all laid out right there, which would suggest it's anything but a suicide and just really, really disturbing. So on every level, it appears to be another complete swing and a miss, or worse, who knows, or worse, by the Norfolk DA and the Massachusetts State Police. And that clearly has an impact in the Birchmore case, but that's going to have an impact probably in the other kind of sort of small case going on in Norfolk County that's slated for a retrial in a few months. So this is a big deal on many, many levels.
It sure is. And I was wondering for you, Mr. Bederow, when you were looking at that indictment, I mean, like, this is big doings for the Commonwealth, right? Like, for the feds to step in and to charge a murder, right? Like, that doesn't happen by the federal government in the Commonwealth. Like, I don't remember another time in my life. Well, maybe there has been, but I don't recall it. And it just, to know that the death penalty is still on the table too. When Josh Levy got up and did that presser on Wednesday afternoon, it was just, it was a moment, it was like a watershed moment, right? Where it was like, oh my gosh, we knew that the feds were coming, but the feds have been here, and that, in my humble opinion, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, so a couple things. The feds, they don't charge just traditional murder. I mean, when person A is accused of killing person B, that is a state court crime. In order for there to be federal jurisdiction, there has to be some connection to some kind of federal underlying crime, in furtherance of a federal crime or something of that nature. So when you do see killings prosecuted in federal court, you may see because there's a conspiracy that crossed state lines kind of thing.
Right.
You see it in organized crime cases, the mafia cases, which are going to have federal jurisdiction. You may see it in, involving conspiracies, RICO conspiracies, or even the traditional basic federal crimes like mail fraud, wire fraud. Those are like the most, they can almost charge that in any case. But in this case, they wrapped it around someone who could have potentially been a witness. So when you look at it, you take a step back and you say, the fact that the feds are prosecuting this as a federal case, in essence, for murder, and they're tying it to Sandra Burchmore potentially being a federal witness, which is true, but that's really digging deep into the federal code to come up with something, which tells me, editorially, they were outraged and really wanted to correct what they perceived to be a complete dropping of the ball, whether intentional or otherwise, by, once again, the Norfolk DA and the investigating agency, which would have been some combination of the Canton Police and Massachusetts State Police, who have a hell of a track record in the last couple of years. So that's the first thing. The fact that the feds would charge this, again, in essence, as a murder case, is very telling, because it is extraordinarily rare. And when you do see it, you will usually see it in the kind of cases that we talked about. But if they didn't act, then no one was going to act. And this officer, or disgraced former officer Farwell, I guess, as he is now, would have walked away from this if they didn't act. So they're doing what they're doing. The evidence they've laid out, although circumstantial, is pretty powerful. Farwell gets due process like everyone else, as anyone would. But this seems like a pretty strong case in terms of motive, in terms of circumstantial reasoning. And the chilling part is the methodical premeditation and then staging the accident, the deleting the messages, so the guilty conscience. I mean, you tie it all together, he's going to have a hell of a road walking out of this. Now, the whole death penalty thing, realistically, they're not going to seek the death penalty. that is usually reserved for, I don't want to say Farwell is not one of the worst of the worst. I mean, what he's alleged to have
Mm.
done, which includes, I mean, grooming a 13-year-old child, exploiting her for 10 years, impregnating her at least once, murdering her, and then leaving her family under the belief that she killed herself, which is terrible. Killed her unborn baby, his own unborn baby. How sick is that? So he's obviously accused of a lot of terrible things, but as far as the federal death penalty, you don't usually see it sought, and when you do, you're usually talking in mass terror cases. I mean, you did see it in the Boston Marathon. They attempted to
Yes.
get that. It was the most obvious example around here, but I would be stunned if they actually sought it. On the other hand, it's a hell of a cudgel they have right now to hang over his head to try to, I don't want to say coerce, but coerce either a guilty plea in some form of flap your gums and tell us what else you may know or not know. But even then, what are they offering him? Close to life in prison or something like that. Just
Right.
not. He's cooked. If he's convicted, whether he makes any kind of deal or not, he's not going to get a great deal. But I did see this on another stream. This may not be surprising, but an ex-FBI agent trying to explain how the death penalty process works. You may be shocked to know that what she said was not accurate. In the federal system, the death penalty decision has nothing to do with the U.S. attorney. Now, they can certainly offer their opinion, but they have something in the federal criminal justice system called the United States Attorney Manual. It is a manual that is sent by the Department of Justice that every U.S. attorney's office has, where it outlines their procedures and policies. And lawyers are familiar with this. But the way the feds would do this is they'll take a recommendation ultimately
Mm-hmm.
from District of Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Office. Ultimately, there'll be some kind of committee that is based in Main Justice down in D.C. that'll take it under advisement. If they were to seek the death penalty, they would have to serve notice of it. They would actually invite the defense lawyers to come in, make their best pitch as to why they shouldn't, or any kind of what they believe to be mitigating circumstances. And there's a whole process and procedure. And ultimately, it's the Attorney General of the United States, like literally the Attorney
The
General,
attorney. Mm-hmm.
who would determine whether we're going to do that or not. So it's a long process, and a lot of times, even when certain cases are death penalty eligible, as this is, in the vast majority of cases, they're not going to seek the death penalty. And I don't believe ultimately, even if Farwell were to say, I'm innocent, I want a trial, I didn't do this, even then, I don't believe they would actually seek it. But, for now, it's in play, as is an additional charge for the killing of the unborn child, which is also a federal crime, and would sanction him to it's essentially the equivalent of murder. That's not a political statement, by the way, for whatever
Right.
people think of unborn children and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. The only difference is that's not a death penalty eligible crime, but certainly the crime against Sandra Burchmore is.
Oh, thank you so much for clarifying that for me, Mark. I was going to ask you because I was wondering, with that presser that Josh Levy did, there was acknowledgement thanking of the Norfolk DA's office, also of the Mass State Police and cooperation. And I was wondering, was that in order for him to try to get the unborn baby, like, you know what I mean? If state charges would come down, is what I was thinking, versus the federal charges, but the feds would be able to additionally charge for. Okay.
They have what they call superseding indictments all the time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be stunned if you saw that in this case, adding that, and also adding defendants potentially to a larger case. But as far as the U.S. attorney thanking the Massachusetts State Police and thanking this, I think a lot of times people read way too much into what is being said at a press conference and assuming what it means or what it doesn't mean.
Right.
He's being diplomatic. He's not going to give a press conference to
Professional.
say the
Yeah.
Massachusetts State Police is a bunch of useless, thanks for nothing, and I can't stand the Norfolk DA, thanks for nothing. I mean, whether they feel that way or not, that's just not the kind of thing that they would do. And I think it's pretty clear that there are going to be other members of the state police, not other members, I should say members, because no one has been accused of anything. Farwell was a Stoughton cop. But I think you are going to see another very lengthy investigation of certain members of the state police to determine whether they are shockingly incompetent or possibly worse. And you can't ignore the elephant in the room, and it relates to the data extraction. I mean, it's not a good look when the same guy who couldn't find the Jennifer McCabe messages, any of them, never mind what time those messages and deletions occurred, somehow missed all of that. And, to be clear, going to the Karen Reed thing for a second, if the defense never gets access to Jennifer McCabe's phone and gets it evaluated themselves, there is no controversy over what messages and Google searches she made, because according to the state police, they didn't find it at all. Now you go to the Birchmore situation and they look at, her phone and look at, Farwell's phone, and they look at messages looking to see what, if any, contacts they had. And the state police say, well, he said their messages were deleted and we can't recover deleted messages. And then, you give it to the FBI and somebody who's actually competent at performing cell phone extractions, and they pull off almost 33,000 messages.
Yeah.
And of course, which lays it all to bear. I mean, it's going to be some of the strongest evidence in the case. It shows the motive. It basically has him admitting things. It shows him grooming her. It shows him abusing her. It shows him talking about just hideous, disgusting things that make you wonder how sick and twisted and evil a man this is. It also shows you when he was coming, when he was going. Fits the timeline about, she was, unfortunately, apparently her phone stopped moving or presumably died within 30 minutes of, Farwell leaving her apartment, all these other things. And, again, if you just went by the state police in both of these cases, none of this data would exist. And there would certainly be no prosecution against Farwell. And I just don't think you could ignore the similarities between these two cases. What are they investigating? In the Karen Reed case, they didn't even see fit to investigate anything going on in the house. They didn't see fit to ask any questions. They were more concerned about witnesses who might have seen an argument in Aruba and all kinds of nonsense like that. And then you bring it to the Birchmore case where it's just shockingly worse. I mean, you didn't think it could get any worse. And they had her pegged as a suicide within a matter of however long it was, when there's just so many red flags. And we didn't even get, as you said, to the medical data, where the opinion that the FBI got, the U.S. Attorney, FBI, whatever it was, about the hyoid bone and in the choking, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that
Yes.
there's just it doesn't fit.
Does not happen. No.
I mean, again, I think I'm not medically trained, but this is not rocket science for those who are. I mean, having dealt with medical examiners and medical experts, in the past, they know certain things and can see certain things. And anyone who has experience in forensic pathology looks for these kinds of things. And it's stunning how the medical examiner that first performed the autopsy and examination of Sandra Burchmore just quickly went with the suicide based on the scene that Farwell apparently created. And it just feels like the medical examiner was influenced by how Sandra Burchmore was found rather than what the science told her, which again is similar to the Karen Reed case where,
Right.
With the ARCA stuff, some of these people want to avoid the science and go with what the crime scene told them, if you will, which are there were 45 pieces of taillight. And I just can't get over how similarly stupid the investigations in these two cases by the Norfolk DA supervising the Massachusetts State Police and the Canton Police. And it's just absolute shit shows with these people again and again. And it's disgusting. And the worst part is, you already had the Karen Reed thing where people really, truly, and with good reason believe that that's a corrupt case. And that there's all these bad things happening and that the cops were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. And then, you get this, what appears to be whitewash of the Birchmore investigation. And how do people feel today? It's 1,000 times worse than it was just a week ago, which is stunning. It's already terrible.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And we have right now we have a special add-on guest right now. It is someone who has investigated the Sandra Burchmore case with Kirk Minahan at Barstool Sports, and the producer of the case season 2, my friend Dave Cullinane, and he's coming on in. Hi, Dave.
I've done a lot of content with you, Kim. That was by far the most professional thing I've ever heard you do. The fact that you just didn't call me some asshole that I do TikTok videos with is one of the most jarring things, way more jarring than whatever we investigated in season 2, hearing that.
You are, listen, after this week, David, you deserve respect. I'll give it to you till at least next Wednesday, okay? So now you and Mr. Mark Bederow, I mean, this is, I may have hit peak performance right now, okay? Punch a Proctor. Okay, let's go.
Right.
Tell me everything.
I heard you guys talking about all this stuff before. It's one of those things. You were addressing this, by the way. Good to meet you, Mark. You were addressing this. I don't know if it's Massachusetts State Police ineptitude or if there's something bigger at play here. I mean, and that's probably the next shoe to drop. Everyone on the internet wants to say John Fanning at one point in time was a Stoughton police officer. He grew up in Stoughton. He knows these guys. We know he knows some of the other perpetrators in this case, not Matthew Farwell, but Robert Devine. We know he knows them well. Is that the next shoe to drop here? Because some of the stuff that came out in this indictment was such a layup. Like it's so obvious that the Massachusetts State Police could have solved this crime. We had heard, I believe it was off the record, we had heard about this broken necklace that was found at the scene. Go back and look at any police report from the Massachusetts State Police, from the Canton Police. Tell me if you find anything about a necklace, because you won't find it. You won't. We heard it off the record. Now we're hearing about it from the feds. Why would that have not have been included? It makes absolutely no sense. The text messages, we had heard from somebody probably toward the end of the podcast when it was being released, maybe even later than that the text messages were just absolutely horrifying to read. We find out it wasn't just about being horrifying to read. It was about the fact that the statutory aspect was admitted to. It was blatant. We had the exact dates. We had exactly where Sandra Burchmore was. She remembered. Like, it's almost too insane to think. And I'm not really that guy typically. Kim, you know this with the Karen Reed case. It was very hard. It was very hard for me. I even said it to Karen at dinner the other night. That's just me trying to respect out there that I went to dinner the other night with Karen Reed. However, I said this to her. It is still hard for me to believe that amount of people can keep a secret like that and cover it all up. It's still a difficult thing. The evidence is the evidence. The trial is the trial. She should have been acquitted. The facts, like ARCA, all that, we could go for days. We've done this, Kim. But in this situation, it was all there for the taking, to wrap it in a bow. And for some reason, they didn't do it. And it just makes you think there is something bigger going on here. And whatever connection John Fanning, the lead investigator, has to the Farwells or whoever else, it played a part in this in a major way.
Dave, can I just ask you one question that I wanted to get on about as it relates to you guys and off the record stuff? People had told you when you were doing the case, when you were actually interviewing people, that they had spoken to the FBI in 2022, correct?
Correct. Yep. We didn't know. I mean, even Kirk and Turtle Boy actually did a podcast together just to kind of tie the Karen Reed case and the Birchmore case, to tie it together, talk about all the names. At that point in time, they thought nothing would happen. As they were speaking, a grand jury was convening regarding the feds and, and what we're seeing now play out. So all this stuff, it was a frustrating case to investigate.
Your audio.
Oh, is it dropping?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me or no?
No. Like a little like Mets. Can you just take it out?
Yeah. Hold on.
There you go. Yeah.
Is that better?
It's different.
It's different. Yeah.
All right. Hold on. I'm changing. I think it's back. Is this the iPhone microphone? Can you hear that better?
Much better.
Okay. I'm sorry. Work stream here. I forget what I was saying, but basically the investigation from talking to the police, talking to the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, nobody gave us anything, but all of her friends were speaking off the record because they were so scared. And if you read that indictment, we might have even, as petty as it is, because we're just wise asses by nature, people can't even believe that like a Barstool Sports podcast does this and covers this as intensely as Kirk did and as we did.
Yeah, he did.
But we had a friend tell us about that whole phone call that he made to the Stoughton Police Department. And we were kind of making fun, like, what kind of friend is that who's just calling to bitch about $200 that she's owed? We're like, what is going on? But really, the purpose behind the whole thing was basically she was upset, and also if she's basically getting revenge. She's saying, well, I know for a fact that one of your colleagues is sleeping with my friend, and I know it started when she was underage. That individual, I cannot believe that the Stoughton Police Department, that officer who took that phone call, took that information and brought it to Matthew Farwell immediately, who threatened Sandra with that information. So not only is now the victim in the situation at risk, the person who called in the tip, physical risk and physical harm, Sandra Burchmore was dead less than 2 weeks later. It is remarkable. It's remarkable that they did not take anybody's words as seriously as they should have. There was numerous. I must have spoken to a minimum of 20 friends that said that he made threats toward her. So it's remarkable.
What you just described was not investigated by them because, look, in dealing with certain organized crime cases, you see this all the time. I mean, somebody says something to the wrong person who they mistrust, who then passes it to the wrong people, and then there ends up with a dead body, shortly thereafter. One might think common sense would have told the investigators that's troubling in and of itself, and what the hell is going on here? But, in the DA's office there, the state police, it's just a shrug of the shoulders, call it a suicide, whatever it is. Don't even worry about how the guy who's now indicted for murder learned about this. I mean, that is troubling. Where the hell was internal affairs on that? Where was all of this happening? Why does it take the federal government to look into that? So it's a disaster on many levels, and beyond how awful it is for Sandra Burchmore, obviously, and her family and friends who have to see that she's gone, had to see her name sullied as someone who tried to kill herself, and that appears to be so clearly not the case. The credibility hit that the DA and state police are taking is just, it's off the charts. And, you're talking about who's going to be next. I mean, look at their ability or lack thereof to examine cell phones. I mean, if you trusted the state police, none of this evidence would be out there. And if they didn't have any of that evidence, where would they be? The same thing you saw, like with all the phone evidence in the Karen Reed case. If you took the word of the state police, all that incriminating evidence, it didn't exist. How many times does that happen? And you ask yourself, do you have like a Trooper Paul problem? In other words, almost a comical level of incompetence, or do you have, a Michael Proctor, if not worse, problem, which is this appears to be a deliberate effort to suppress facts to help a buddy. You talked about the possible connections with the Stoughton police. And one of the things that's so disturbing about all of this is in this whole Canton area and involving the DA, the state police, the neighboring towns, why is all of the law enforcement and the relationships there so incestuous? I mean, it's so everyone knows everyone and covers for it's just, You wouldn't know that these are major suburbs of Boston in 2024. You would think you're in some third world banana republic where it's just insane to me.
I said this, Mark, and Kim, I think I've told you this story, is I went to go speak with Michael Morrissey about this case, and Brian Tully was standing right next to him. Some other gentleman was next to him. And I said, John Fanning is from Stoughton, Massachusetts. John Fanning spent some time on the Stoughton Police Department.
Yeah.
I won't even get into the three other things that are questionable, but however, those facts just there alone, don't you think it's probably not the greatest move in the world, even from just, at the end of this investigation, your credibility is harmed by me telling you these facts. Somebody looking at it saying, the lead investigator knows all these players, is from the same neck of the woods. What do you say about somebody concerned with a conflict of interest investigating this case? And he looked me in the eyes and he said that by knowing the players involved, it could be an asset to the investigation, which is one of the craziest things I've ever seen or heard, especially
From your
a district
Norfolk
attorney.
DA. Your Norfolk DA said that to an interview.
Crazy is one word, disgraceful is another. I mean, for the elected district attorney to say it in a case where a girl was allegedly groomed by a town police officer in which she lived in which she was, I mean, she went there to learn how to be a junior police officer, to, become a better person, get experience, whatever, the training is and all that kind of stuff. And, you entrust your police officers to take care of them, teach them responsibility, all these things. What you don't expect them to do is to exploit, abuse, rape, and then murder. I don't think it's asking too much not to allow that. And for the district attorney to say, well, if we get some other cops who are buddy with all these people from that town because they know the players, that's a good thing. Then what you're basically saying, Dave, is to the people who live in Norfolk County, wake the hell up, hear what you're saying, and factor that in the next time. I mean, I don't even know what else to say other than disgraceful.
Right.
That's just nuts.
Right. And pair that with, I think Kirk said this in our update episode yesterday. I had been on phone calls with John Fanning, the lead investigator. He tried to convince us, borderline trying to make us feel like we were stupid for thinking it was anything other than a suicide. But he kept saying he went over there to break up with her, and Sandra Burchmore made an impulse decision. That was his quote.
Impulse decision.
Right. And then,
so in other words, what she did was she got upset. She said, I'll put in some laundry. And then on the snap of a finger said, I'm going to somehow tie a duffel bag around my neck and sit down against the door of the closet that this guy, as it turns out, was seen creeping around in a couple of days before, after he got a key. I mean, honestly, these people don't investigate. They're not serious investigators, and they weren't serious. You saw the evidence in the Karen Reed case. These are the same people who were saying, I didn't think it was suspicious that John O'Keefe was lying in the middle of a lawn with one shoe on, wearing, with no coat on, with a cocktail glass in his hand. And I didn't want to know if he had been in the house, and it didn't strike me as odd because, I wear shorts in the winter. So, whatever. Right. I mean, this is crazy. And it's sad because you can't imagine what this girl's family and friends have to experience. And I keep going back to this, but I mean, the murder is hideous and nothing will ever top that. But to stage the accident it's insulting to her. It's a lack of respect for the person you just killed. It's a lack of respect for your own child. It's a lack of respect for her own family, her own friends. And for them to have to believe that she killed herself when you in fact killed her, and then lied about your relationship with her, deleted all your messages. I mean, when you talk about federal sentencing guidelines, this guy is checking off every aggravating factor you can possibly think of. I mean, it's just sick. Really.
I will.
Go ahead, Dave.
Let me ask one. So I apologize. Let me ask one thing of Mark too, and then I got to run because I've been ignoring my kids at this playground for far too long at this moment. However, is it abnormal in a situation like this? I was in the courtroom when he was arraigned the other day. no signs of family. Is that a normal? There was nowhere to be found. Is that normal, or is that just because
No,
of they?
no, he's a married, employed guy. I mean, I know he kind of had to leave the police department. He's married. I mean, I think it's totally normal that his young kids, my God, and you can't help but feel terrible for them, that you wouldn't subject your kids to this horrible thing, to see dad brought out in shackles and called the worst person in the world. But by the wife not being there, yeah, that's telling. To have no family and friends and supporters, that's telling. But then again, I mean, who the hell wants to support this guy? I mean,
Right.
these allegations are as awful as you'll see. And you'll see everyone move away from him. The union is not going to defend him. They're not going to put out any, the stupid statements like they put out with Proctor, the state police, for, months and months defending him. This is a whole nother level. They're not going to pay for his lawyers. This guy is going to be on an island by himself for sure.
Right. Yeah, I was a little amazed at it. I didn't know if that was normal or not, because by all accounts, his wife has stuck by him through all this, which is going on 3 years, which is remarkable in its own right. And I wish she had more confidence in herself or something. I don't know.
She didn't believe it. She believed her husband. And now,
right.
You realize it's a different universe and you read the indictment. I mean, look, whatever he did or didn't do, and I don't know anything about the wife or anything, but assuming she's just a normal person who, made a poor choice in marriage, she has kids, and her husband is a pariah and a sick and twisted murderer. And there's also the little things that seem a little less important given the fact that he allegedly murdered Sandra Burchmore. But the idea that he, did what he had to do and then, ran over to the hospital to hold his wife's hand while she's giving birth. I mean, honestly, there is a level of depravity and sickness here that you start to understand why perhaps the wife is, not going to be publicly supportive, and I would assume not privately either. And
Right.
You take the kids, you get a divorce lawyer. It's going to be a hell of a hard time for her. But I mean, how do you have that guy be in your life? I mean, look, police officers get accused of crimes. A lot of times people don't believe it's true. What do? They'll pack the courtroom. You see it all the time. But killing a young woman that you impregnated and abused for a decade while she was a child.
Yep.
And just, I mean, the sad part is, I mean, look at the last 10 years of her life. I mean, she was yet happy. You read these charging documents and you can't help
that's
but
the manipulation and the coercion, and that was
right.
like a Stockholm. So that's her mental health.
It breaks your heart in her mind that she's thinking, I can make this work and we're going to have a child and this is all going to be good. And you're thinking, no. And then you're reading this knowing how the story ends anyway, but seeing her be optimistic right up to the end, it's just sick. This is, I mean, 26 years of doing this. That's one of the worst
affidavits I've ever. That's the worst thing I've seen. Realistically, that I've read as a medical professional. That 45 pages, I needed to take 3 different breaks to get through it, and my heart is just absolutely broken for Sandra and her family and the community. But Dave, before you go, I just wanted to ask you. He gets nabbed in Revere, right? Farwell is nabbed in Revere. Have we confirmed that if it was actually his son with him?
I haven't. I haven't.
either.
I don't know who else. I don't know who else that would be. If you were just a bystander watching the situation, I don't know why a kid would be that close.
Yeah, right.
To be honest with you, if that is the case, it's an absolute shame that child had to witness that. I don't know. But I was not able to confirm that. No.
And then you got. Sorry. Go ahead. Mark.
I was just saying, but I was told he was nabbed the day before in New Mexico. What are you talking about here?
Oh God, Lord help us. Okay.
Speaking of the New Mexico thing, where I believe Billy Farwell is still there. Which, by the way, if you haven't, I mean, because a lot of people are just new in reading that indictment specifically, and they have not gone back to whether it be the Stoughton Internal Affairs reports or the Massachusetts State Police. Billy Farwell is no saint. He knows he's no saint. And I would be shocked if he is not singing to the highest degree to save his ass. And by all accounts, off the record, I've heard these things. I don't know if it's factual, but I would guarantee you that he is singing to the feds right now to protect himself, if he can even do so, because he is
On
just
his
as much
brother.
of a scumbag. Yeah.
On his
Which,
brother.
by the way, I mean, that's the thing is we talk about the wife, and I can't judge him. I don't know going through this stuff. What it is, what it is. Back to all those things you just said,
Right.
Mark. However, you read this, you now see a side of your husband that you may not have known existed.
Right.
We're talking about, call me, like, pretend that I'm your older brother, pretend that you're 12 years old, or whatever the exact word. You guys might go over it in the next, when I leave here. I don't know, but we're talking about somebody who is insanely depraved, right? Like that
Yeah.
I guarantee you, we did not read all of what they probably found on his devices and computers and
hell
what
no.
he's searching and all that stuff. So she might have just learned a completely side of her husband that wasn't just about, her husband having an affair with an underage girl or stuff and it lasting for as long as it did or something. She might have learned stuff that she never
David,
believed could
it
have
was
been possible.
necrophilia. There was allegations of necrophilia. There is pedophilia. I mean, you're absolutely right. This could have been a bomb, and this is very common. I'm not diagnosing anybody in psychopathy, he might have been a psychopath, and actually been one that William, as you're saying, even though they're twins, though, that I'm trying to wrap my brain around, because there was a very odd, very sickened and very sadistic connection with them as it related to their abuse of Sandra as well. Whether if I know it's not that when she was underage with William, however, that was a weird connection that he knew and that was still doing that as his twin brother. I just found that very interesting, though, Dave, that you think that he's singing like a canary, which he should. Keep singing,
Has
boo.
to be.
Keep
Has,
singing.
Has to be. I mean, he fled to New Mexico. Like I said, I don't know if he's still there. There was some shadiness with when he got hired by the TSA. He got fired a week later because of something along the lines of like the Stone Police Department when they were called for a referral. They never mentioned this stuff, and it wasn't as publicized at that point. So there's more to drop on this one. I fundamentally believe it. So.
Awesome. Well, and then Dave, do you want to give us anything just of like, what was the feeling? We talked about this kind of on TikTok, but for our YouTube humans, how was your feeling in court when you were there at the arraignment? What did you feel? How did he look, etc.?
He looked like shit. Oh my God. He looked like garbage. Like that one of those, I think I was telling you, he had like that, almost like the 1970s sideburns look that was like a triangle. You know what I'm talking about? He just looked so disheveled. It was this, he's 6'4", so he's scary in its own right. And he's not in the best shape of his life. So he just has this look about him where he looks like a guilty individual, but his posture, he just looks so pathetic at the same time. So it was a weird kind of mix of feelings that I saw. Literally, it was like me and what felt like 3 media members, and then just all FBI Boston, the U.S. Attorney's Office staff in there. So it was a small crew in there. It's a shame people didn't get to see images like that, but yeah, it was eerie. It was almost as pathetic as the video I captured of John Fanning and Brian Tully walking out of the courthouse with their heads down, wearing matching shoes.
They're Bobo shoes.
I have those shoes, by the way, and now
you can't wear them.
And I'm wondering why. I
do
was
it.
on more than black, but I have to reevaluate that.
Yeah, you can't do it. But yeah, it was an eerie feeling. It was just good after all that, and knowing, that we felt the way we did, and Kirk had the guts to say it on a big platform. The podcast did monster numbers when it came out. Now it's getting the second life again, obviously, but he had the balls to say he did not agree with any of the findings. And you don't see that a lot, if somebody like willing to go to that distance. So he deserves a shit ton of credit on that. And that's that. And I got to go find my
Kirk
kids.
was right. Kirk was right. That's
right.
what we're just trending on Twitter.
Hashtag Kirk was right. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, Kim. I need to thank you because I was only in the green room for approximately 3 minutes. And if it was anything over 5 minutes long, We call that a Mike Crawford, and we don't like to be
Okay.
disrespected. We don't like to be
Okay.
disrespected around here, all right?
I love you.
Go any further.
I love you.
I won't go any further than that. I won't go any further than that. Bye, Mark. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
I love everything I hear from you. So, all right, bye, guys.
Bye. Well, I'm so glad that Dave was able to join us just to give us, because he was, there and being such a huge part of producing the case season 2. And like he said, all the credit to Kirk Minahan for going where no one was willing to go at that time. And I do want to say that it seems to me that there's a little bit of a kind of a split in the sexes, Mark, with it, because women, when I heard that Sandra had, when I heard of her death and that it was initially ruled a suicide, I was like, oh my gosh, a 23-year-old with her first child. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. Then I didn't know Dave at the time, but I listened to the case season 2, and that I knew. I said, absolutely not. No way, no shape, no form. Not just as a medical professional, but like as someone who, like, with her being so excited about this pregnancy, right? With her getting a car seat right before she was ordering Amazon. Like you said, we know that there was clothes that were not turned over from the washer to the dryer. And there was so many questions from me from a medical standpoint, which I'd love to go to after, but I want to get your take on, that was where I know that a lot of people and trusting people from the Commonwealth said, well, okay, if the police are saying this is one thing, but I do want to remind everybody that the Office of Chief Medical Examiner in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is an arm of Mass State Police. They do not complete their own investigations. They are literally, there is no separation of church and state. And our former president of Mass Bar Association and our former Ed Grundy, the Norfolk DA, everyone's been fighting for 40 years to try to get that separation, because the medical examiner's office should be conducting a thorough, impartial, non-connected, independent investigation on every death that is sent to their office, in my humble opinion. And for them to, when we're seeing that corroboration, when we're seeing those calls from, whether it be Proctor in the Karen Reed trial, where him and DeChico are talking shit about how, I could have gotten to her sooner, and rookie move that you didn't get the homicide designation. This is the stuff, guys, that when we talk about, there has to be a large undertaking of reform, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, because I agree with everything you just said. But, I was going to tie it back to what you just mentioned at the end, where the text messages in the Karen Reed case, where you literally saw this cast of characters from the state police hazing each other, making fun of each other for not being tough enough to bully the medical examiner to give them what they needed to upgrade the charges. And that, I think, just illustrates perfectly the problem that you see having the medical examiner, in essence, be an arm of the state police. It's terrible. I mean, you have to get, you need a medical examiner to call balls and strikes on what they see medically. And also you have to have confidence in what they're doing. And when you read the documents that were filed in the Birchmore case, putting aside whether it's on purpose or not, how can you not help but wonder whether the medical examiner in that case was pressured to just shut it as a suicide, when the independent medical examiner that the FBI used for, essentially the ARCA of that case, if you will, said this is medically absurd because of the hyoid bone issue and the placement and all the other medical stuff that I'm not equipped scientifically to explain. But again, those who are clearly understand. And, was that an accident? Was there pressure? Who knows? But again, there's a crisis in lack of confidence in anything the state police do, whether it be the medical findings, whether it be the criminal investigation, whether it be their ability to extract cell phones, whether it be, I mean, you name it, they're failing at everything that happens that they investigate in Norfolk County. Everything. I mean, everything they're doing on these big cases is just, no one has any confidence in what they're doing. And no one, or very few people, had confidence a week ago. And now it's, you have two scandals that are orbiting each other at the same time and are both growing worse and worse by the day. And, people need to understand that when you take, for example, the failure to find the almost 33,000 messages in Sandra Burchmore's case, that's the same witness in the Karen Reed case who's telling you with a straight face that, John O'Keefe could not have been inside the house because the cell phone data shows that, he had to be in this location and the steps were from this hill, from doing, and you sit there and say, why am I listening to anything this guy says when he can't even pick up one, let alone 33,000 deleted text messages, or can't pick up the McCabe messages? And isn't he the one who also muttered under his breath during the Karen Reed trial about something like, kill me now or F my life? Or do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, it was kill me now. Yeah.
He had like a stream of consciousness as if he knew like something is wrong here. And I would expect that trooper to be, who also, I believe, if I'm wrong, someone please correct me because we don't want misinformation here. But wasn't he a Stoughton police officer too?
Oh, Guarino. I don't know that.
Maybe,
guys, do we know?
Maybe from Stoughton. Again, if I'm conflating troopers and officers, someone ought to correct that because I don't want to spread misinformation. But I think as part of this whole incestuous type of connection to all of these things, I believe that he has ties to that town in
Ben
Norwich.
tells us Norwood. Yeah. Okay. But yeah.
Whatever. I screwed the pooch on that. Delete the last 2 minutes of this.
No.
But the point is, the public can't help but wonder, is something intentional going on here, or is there a level of incompetence in, this is supposed to be the cell phone guy who's the expert to get it all done. And he couldn't get it done in the Karen Reed case. They had to go out and search on the internet. If you remember, they put out an RFP for, we'll give somebody $5,000 or $10,000 to look at a phone because we can't have Guarino do it. Well, they had him do it in Birchmore and he blew it. And, if that evidence isn't located and the FBI doesn't say, tag us in, we'll take it from here, then nothing's happening. And
that was the biggest thing too, right? When we were hearing Josh Levy get up there and he said when he had staged the scene, right? So that Farwell had committed what they allege and as, killing of a witness, a potential witness, and that he staged the scene and that he, with an attempt to get away with murder, which he almost did, right? Which he almost did, Mark. And that was chilling. The hair on my arms stood up when he said that, because, just as a truth seeker, a seeker of justice, somebody interested in the law, and as a medical professional and a mother and a human, we all should look at this and be horrified, which we are. And that's why all of you here with us today, Mr. Bederow, who is so busy with his career and life and children and, everything he's got going on, but that we're trying to keep the light, shining light on it, guys. That is the mission, right? There is nothing else other than this does not feel okay. We want you to know that we have questions and that we're not going to stop until there are answers, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the question is who, if anyone, has any confidence in what the Massachusetts State Police Division that's based out of the Norfolk DA's office in connection with the Norfolk DA's office and what they're doing. I mean, is there a single sane person at this point who has confidence in their ability to investigate serious and sensitive matters. And it doesn't matter whether you think they're intentionally corrupt or shockingly incompetent. Neither one is exactly confidence inspiring. And they completely botched the Karen Reed case. Then they completely botched the Sandra Burchmore investigation, which leads to the other question is, what else have they botched? And, you'll find out in due course if there are any other ones. But how do you have confidence in their ability to investigate? How do you have confidence in their ability to investigate in good faith and follow all leads? How do you have any confidence in their ability to extract a cell phone, to interview witnesses, to do the right thing? How do you have any confidence that they're not going to bully the medical examiner or elbow them to get what they want? How do you have any confidence that the medical examiner on their own is going to reach the right conclusion? I mean, you're just going on evidence and common sense. And, they declared this a suicide in how many days after, quote unquote, investigating this, right?
Oh, yeah. It was. No, you're absolutely right. I just wanted to say, while we were just on that, Mark, I wanted to get your take on this because this was mind-blowing to me, just as it relates to the determination of the medical examiner and the scene in which Sergeant Lank, oh, how do we know him? Hunter Proctor, okay? But we knew that he was the first to the scene at Sandra's, at the apartment. Well, on February 4th, Canton Police wellness check was called in. And Sandra Burchmore, this is a little triggering, guys. If you need this, I'm just going to go over my medical opinion. So I just want to give you a heads up, okay? So they find Sandra Burchmore seated on the floor with a duffel bag strap around her neck, and this was tied to a doorknob of the closet, right? The necklace was on the floor, and this is what Dave was telling us about, guys, that this was not understood or investigated or even found by Canton Police.
Isn't that obvious? That
and it didn't come off with a clasp. It was a gang, right? So hello. And then here was a very interesting finding for me. Sandra's cell phone was found 12 inches from her right hand and just 6 inches from her right bent knee. Now, Mark, I'm going to go over with you what it is like to have it's a partial weight hanging or I don't know how to, hanging. I'm sorry. I have to say it, guys. So this is only a partial weight because she did not, go from a higher place,
all her force, not literally
correct. Yeah. It's only partial weight, not full weight. So this would have been for Sandra Burchmore not only a slow situation, okay, to end her own life, but it also would have been painful. And you're not going to tell me that somebody to extend the process, right? What in the world would someone who was like, I'm making this decision right now, and this is it. Why would you put that cell phone so close that if she put her leg out and extended her leg, she would have been able to get her cell phone 6 inches from that knee, right? And she would have been able to just say, at any time, Mark, she would have went like this, right? As tight as it was, she could have, in the position and the seated way in which they said that this occurred, I don't think that anybody would have put their phone that close for you to stop. She would have also had a significant amount of time to say, if I wanted to do this, let's say she was making this impulse decision, she wants to check out. When you decide to check out that way, you got some time, babes, to really think about it. Think about your baby, think about your family, think about maybe there was a lot of opportunity there, more than many other ways to check out of this lifetime. Okay. Very uncharacteristic of pregnancy, in my opinion. So then the Office of Chief Medical Examiners ruled this asphyxia by hanging. And I assumed in my mind, Mr. Bederow, that she missed the hyoid bone. That was the only way for this not to be something that needs to be significantly investigated and looked into. But on her report, she documented the hyoid bone. And I want to tell you that 0 out of 100 partial weight bearing hangings result in a fracture or break in the hyoid bone. 0.
But 100% chokings do.
Exactly. And domestics. And this is where it comes, is that she also had petechiae, like petechial hemorrhage, that was very understandable in her orbits, in her eyes. And the thing that just I'm never going to understand is she saw the finding. When you saw the finding and she knows. So now some people online, some trolls will like to tell us that suicide and homicide you're at very high risk as a woman when you are pregnant. The leading cause of death of pregnant women is homicide. It's a terrible statistic. It is true. More than preeclampsia, anything else, diabetes, anything else, it is going to be homicide. And you are at the most risk for interpartner violence at that time because of, other issues that go on interpersonally. And that can associate with, So, but the real fact of the matter is that when you are a pregnant woman at the highest risk of homicide, when you are at the highest risk of suicide for women is postpartum, because we suffer sometimes with baby blues, with postpartum depression, and all the way up to postpartum psychosis that could end in you having thoughts or visions of wanting to take your life or the life of your child. And when I tell you that this is the most horrific medical examiner the job that was done here was done, in my opinion, in collusion with the Mass State Police, because they said this is what we found, this is what it's going to be. And even with her education, her training, and her experience, and finding it, let's say she didn't find it, right? If she was like, oh, I didn't document it, I didn't note it, then I could say, okay, that almost makes sense to me. She missed it. Still, she needs retraining, but you found it and you didn't do anything about it. And to me, she will never, ever be given a pass on my watch. And then Dr. Baden, the independent family medical examiner who reviewed the autopsy, famed Dr. Baden, came back with asphyxia by strangulation, and as did Dr. Smock, by the feds, asphyxia and strangulation. Additionally, in Dr. Smock's, his findings, which was alarming to me, was that he found an imprint on Sandra Burchmore's right chest, okay? And it is consistent with blunt force trauma from an assault, okay? That is not from her putting a strap around her own neck. So I just wanted to get that out there. And I wanted to also say to any women in the chat that if you or anybody it is not safe, that I encourage you to reach out for help. Call 211 locally in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Try to call women's shelters, family, friends, because I know that you want to be here for yourself and for your baby. Okay. And you deserve to be here. So that's my spiel, Mark. But these findings were so egregious, in my humble opinion, that I can't turn the other way, right? They can't make me look the other way and say that this, was an honest mistake. You found it, you did nothing.
Yeah, and you're expressing the whether it is an honest mistake or not that these agencies have. They have no credibility. They had no credibility before, and they certainly have none now. And they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. And, was it a whitewash? It feels that way. I mean, they kind of rushed the conclusion through. They appeared to not investigate, ignore some obvious red flags, which both medically and circumstantially would kind of tilt the needle against suicide. If nothing else, why not look into this deeper? When they said we couldn't find any text messages between these people, and I believe Farwell had said I deleted them, Well, guess what? The state authorities have a lot of power to do other things. I see this all the time in cases I've had in New York. I remember a really horrible murder case 4 or 5 years ago. I had a guy who was a witness, was coerced into helping them clean a crime scene, but these two other guys committed a hideous homicide, and the Manhattan DA's office could not get into the iPhones of the main players. Okay. And they very much wanted to get in and they couldn't. They were locked out with the 6-code Apple thing. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't do, the NYPD computer guys couldn't get in. The Manhattan DA has their own crime lab cut for computer forensics. They couldn't get in. They didn't do what the state police did here, which says, sorry, guys. You know what they do? They go to the FBI. They seek help. They send it out. They send it out, and in certain cases, the FBI will help. Maybe certain cases they won't. But a young woman who may have been murdered, and we're trying to determine whether a police officer murdered him. For the love of God, do something. Try. Don't just accept Guarino's word. Sorry, knowing, by the way, and here's what's awful. Knowing that the police officer or ex-police officer had acknowledged that there were messages, but I deleted them all. Okay. Knowing that he had been grooming her and had an improper relationship for 10 years with her, knowing that there had been at least one pregnancy. For the love of God, go attempt to find an answer. And if you can't get in, at least you tried and can tell her family and other people, we can't do it. But this appears to be different than that. It appears to be a whitewash. And whether it was just incompetence, corruption, or somewhere in the middle, they just seem to shrug their shoulders, call it a suicide. What's next? And of course, at the time that this was happening, this is, before Karen Reed, and certainly before Karen Reed was anything other than, an open and shut hit and run, even as that case went on. They never would have foreseen that the feds could look at this. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sure one of the many regrets that they have, the state police and the Norfolk DA, on both of these terrible cases, is the benefit of hindsight, knowing well after the fact that their conduct is being heavily scrutinized. The cell phones are being examined. The medical evidence is being reevaluated. Witnesses are actually being interviewed properly. Surveillance video is being looked at carefully, and you could go on and on. And a funny thing happened when professional, trained, and serious investigators who want to find the truth, whatever it is, get involved. They find a set of facts which is just 180 degrees different than these people found in both of these cases. And, you're in a situation right now where, as a result, one of the Sandra Burchmore is dead along with her baby. And another woman who's caught up in this mess is probably on the verge, as ludicrous as this sounds, of being tried for crimes, 2 of which she's already been acquitted. And this is why people look at Norfolk County and say, this is a joke. This place, the Chinatown jokes, whatever it is, this place appears to be a joke. It appears to be more, we've said this before, a product of the Stalin Soviet Union than a bastion of liberty, of which Massachusetts is famous for,
right.
dealing with overthrowing oppression, not committing all of this oppression. So their credibility of these agencies is just going to be so damaged from this, and really we'll see what the fallout is. But I tend to believe this is probably going to be the end of Morrissey. Whether he survives his term, whatever. I don't know that he can run again.
He's out gallivanting and fundraising still. Like, are you out of your mind? It reeks of it's so entitled. It's so emboldened. And
when you're in power for this long,
yeah.
And I always compare this to the Charles Hines Brooklyn DA's office. It corrupts your thought process, not even just literal corruption. You just assume, you get fat and lazy. You assume you're in charge. Nothing's ever going to happen because it's just the way it is. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. I'm the boss, and this is how it goes. And
Right.
really what's going to happen is it's going to take events outside of his control to make him stop. And you saw this in Brooklyn. And then the Eastern District of New York started investigating Charles Hines. A lot of his bad cases came to light and he got tossed overboard. In Norfolk County, it won't be him necessarily that steps aside. It'll be his party bosses and handlers who say, here's the gold watch, it's time to go. And that's that. And, you have to think at some point that this is coming, because as scandalous and controversial as the Karen Reed case is, you now combine it with what's going on here. And I mean, I don't know how anyone outside of maybe 12 people and a bunch of trolls, some of whom may live in Norfolk County and others who are scattered in other parts of Massachusetts and, Indiana and other places, may not believe that this guy can survive. I mean, there's a lack of credibility and a crisis of credibility where I just don't know how the regular people in that county can have any confidence in the law enforcement professionals in their towns and the state and in the county.
You're absolutely right, Mark. And what is just like mind blowing to me? I had Heather Bish, which is Molly Bish, if you remember from Warren, 16-year-old, yes,
Yeah.
who went tragically was murdered in 2000 at Commons Pond. And I asked her because which I'd love to talk to you about another time, but Michael Morrissey is on the Victims Witness Advocacy Board. He sits on it. He was appointed to it by Maura Healey. And so you're telling me that victims, including Heather Bish, have to be subjected to this man, which she says, and I believe Heather, I stand with Heather Bish and justice for Molly Bish as well. She's had run-ins and problems with Joe Early, the Worcester DA. She has hit roadblock after roadblock with Mass State Police, and she is struggling to get even access to evidence and so many other things. But she let me know that she has brought this up and spoke to Maura Healey and asked her, and told her she has some significant concerns with him sitting on that board. And that Governor Healey, said, okay, pound sand, I guess, not even listening. And why would you put him on that board?
I can't answer that. Obviously, I mean, there's not like there's any shortage of people who could do that. I don't know when he was appointed. Maybe it's, at a different time period before it's as bad as it is now. I don't know. But I mean, the governor obviously is going to have to at some point deal with this. And what's interesting too is she has a background in prosecution. So
Amen.
It's not that she is literally a politician on the outside looking in who has to rely upon advisors to say, what do I do here? She actually knows how the sausage is made in a criminal investigation and prosecution and what's proper and what's not. And I don't know how anybody who's being honest to the process and who looks at this and looks again how the state police have done things in Norfolk County, not all police officers, not all state police, but and how that DA's office has handled these investigations and prosecutions, how guys like Proctor and others have run rampant with their just inappropriate misogynist conduct, how you don't say, what the hell is going on in Norfolk County law enforcement? And at some point, she ought to be held to account for that too and be forced to answer it, because ultimately, she's the governor and the buck stops with her in her state. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I am just appalled because, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, have we heard anything from Governor Healey since the federal, arraignment for Matthew Farwell? I I feel like the last thing I heard from her was, yes, she acknowledged that Puncher Proctor was, despicable and all that, but I didn't. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't hear anything. No comment from the governor of Massachusetts.
The concern is, I mean, obviously, a young woman murdered after being treated horrifically for over a decade. I mean, if that's not enough to get a comment, but even politically, there's another issue here. This Explorers Club, young, vulnerable women coming to learn life skills, to learn how to become responsible people, to rely on police officers for teaching them responsibility and self-worth and whatever. And instead, it's a grooming pit where they're, this girl, and you've heard
Breaking
out
them. Yeah,
of
breaking
others,
their spirits. Yeah.
literally being assaulted, and in Sandra Burchmore's case, literally being groomed, abused, assaulted, raped, murdered, and then in essence framed for suicide. I mean, this is, if nothing else, you would think that the chief politicians in the state would be concerned. What the hell is going on at the police stations here in doing this? We're supposed to be teaching, young kids, young girls to become
Young women,
responsible
exactly.
women, not to become, sex dolls for these disgusting men who are abusing them, and then, at least in this case, killing them. So what's going on with the Stoughton police? I mean, how did this culture develop? It's interesting because, go back to Karen Reed. Look at the sick, grooming, misogynist culture, in the Stoughton Explorers program. And although it's a different issue, literally, but look at the sick, misogynist culture in the Massachusetts State Police, where Michael Proctor's yucking it up about looking for nudes and haven't found any nudes yet. And, all the stuff that he was saying that was liked by some of his buddies. And you sit here and say, again, it's a complete cultural thing. And these are the people that are supposed to be protecting you, not harassing, assaulting, abusing, grooming, raping, and killing.
Yeah, and I just feel like it feels so egregious just as a woman. Do you know what I mean? And like when we look at, and I'm a daughter of a Massachusetts police officer, and it is just I know in my heart of hearts that Sandra's mother and her grandmother thought that she was going to be safe in that program, and that
you go to the police when you're in trouble, not to get killed.
That this was going to be such a great thing for her formative years, right?
Right.
In order to not only build confidence, but for her to figure out how to protect oneself from predators. And she was preyed upon.
By
so
the,
I
by,
want us
by a
all,
man in blue. I mean, the one person you're supposed to run to for safety is not supposed to be the one who grooms, assaults, rapes, and kills. I mean, it's, she ran into the death sentence in the arms of the person that, should have prevented her from that in a time of need or trouble. And that's what makes it so doubly tragic, is to literally, try to develop life skills and learn how to be responsible. You go to a junior police explorers program, and that ends up ruining and destroying the last 10 years of your life, and ultimately ends up with you, from what the feds say in a very serious indictment, having the life choked out of you. And it's terrible.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, Mark, I feel like although we've gone through extremely high highs this week of having this actually having, him be apprehended, arrested, affidavit, arraigned, and him not getting not getting bail, like he was held for dangerousness, right?
Right.
So that was such a high, but in the juxtaposition of reading that affidavit, it has just, And however bad I thought it was going to be, Mark, however bad I had imagined, and babe, I am sorry, Mr. Bederow, I imagined, I say that, like, I say I have seen a lot, right, in my career, and that still really took my breath away. And how bad I believed it was 1,000 times worse. And we only got that 45 pages, guys. You know that there was 33,000 other, other text messages, damn near, that were available, and they just had to put in what they had to for charging purposes. But imagine what wasn't in there. And I think that we are all just continuing to move forward as a community, as a group, raising our voices in support of justice for Sandra Burchmore, a justice for Karen Reed, and justice for Officer John O'Keefe. And all of them are strangely and will forever be slightly connected in this orbit of a zip code that is almost like an evil zip code at this point. Like, what was going on?
Doesn't it feel like it's like a different version of like a tortured town, like Hawkins, Indiana, and Stranger Things? Like it's
Stranger Things. I'm in the Upside Down. Yeah.
It's the other thing is this too, and this really triggers a lot of the nasty people that are obsessed with seeing a certain individual go to prison for the rest of her life, which is not going to happen. But they have to understand, and this is not meant to be triggering, but this is just common sense from people who do this for a living. They need to understand that what happened with the arrest in the Sandra Burchmore case is potentially a devastating blow to the DA's case against Karen Reed. They'll try to tell you, the ex-FBI agent, that one has nothing to do with the other. And that is just oversimplistic, ignoring the elephant in the room type stuff for really two reasons. Number one, the jury pool is watching. Okay. And since Karen Reed's case ended in a couple of months, Proctor is close to gone. Buchanan and Tully are in trouble. Kevin Albert is in trouble, has been suspended. The jury pool knows that Karen Reed was essentially acquitted of 2 counts. Never mind the legal stuff. The fact is, the jurors are saying we acquitted her, so they're all going to know that. Now you're going, any potential jurors in a second trial, on top of knowing all of that, now know that the same cast of characters quickly did one of these with the Birchmore thing, which is exactly what the Karen Reed defense argued they did in her case. And the feds have stepped in. They have indicted, but and that's just by way of background, like, that could color jurors in a just general background sense. But part of it is also much more practical and devastating for the DA, and that's Guarino. Okay.
Wow.
As it turns out, in hindsight, given that they were at least able to hang a jury on one of these counts, or 3, according to, the DA and the court, whatever, it doesn't matter for this point. His testimony that, he could not have been in the basement, he could not have been making steps, all of that stuff that became a really significant argument to the DA. Now, in addition to attacking that and his own credibility as they did at the trial, the jury's going to find out one way or the other that you examine the cell phone in another, large murder case. And just like with Jennifer McCabe, just like with all this other stuff, you had almost 33,000 chances to find a single message, and you went 0 for 33,000 or thereabouts. And at best, that is woeful incompetence. At worst, it's disturbing, and it feels almost like, how could it not be intentional to miss that many when you are the so-called expert? So really, the defense has their pick to a jury. Is Guarino a Trooper Paul kind of guy, or is he a disgraced Trooper Proctor kind of guy? And the answer is, it doesn't really matter. But their key cell phone witness has been kneecapped by the time they
Completely.
try to retry her, on top of Proctor being damaged, on top of Buchanan being damaged, on top of Tully being damaged, on top of the jury already knowing that she was acquitted, on top of the fact that the defense is going to do other things. So as terrible as the Birchmore case is just for what happened to Sandra, it is devastating, I believe, to the DA's ability to retry Karen Reed.
And Mark, what do you think as it relates to? I am under the impression that and I think this might be incorrect information. This is what I heard. I think from Kevin from the Yellow Cottage Tales. But I thought he said that Trooper Paul, sorry, speak well, Kimberly, is being replaced by another trooper. Is this correct?
I don't know if it's correct, but again, what they're doing are shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, the short answer is who cares? Because they cannot recall Trooper Paul. He was by far the most embarrassing so-called, in fact, non-expert witness I've ever seen. And whether it was intentional or not, it was cringe, it was silly, it was cartoonish. He can't testify. But the problem is, if he doesn't testify and they hire another person, it can't be another state trooper because that agency is damaged. And he's going to say, I disagree with Trooper Paul. No, they need to, and a state trooper is not going to be able to go toe to toe with the ARCA guys. The only way that they can even retry the case with a straight face is to get an expert on the level of the ARCA guys. And they're not going to do that for a simple reason, because any expert on the level of the ARCA guys is going to be guided by Jesse Pinkman's favorite subject in school, science. Okay. And any science-based investigator who uses physics, kinetics, all this other stuff is not going to disagree with the ARCA stuff, because it's a scientific analysis. It's a fact-based, type of field. It's not
correct. And no one's going to come up with that same conclusion. No one is going to come up with the same, summary and results conclusion as Trooper Paul and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If you are being guided by the principles of physics, kinetics, and science.
But the problem is when they don't use Trooper Paul and they try to use someone else, even if it gets them better than where they were, the defense is going to rub their noses all over it, making sure the jury knows that there was another expert. I mean, the DA has a right to change witnesses. They have a right to change certain things. They can't change their legal theory, but they can, fudge the facts a little bit. But if they try to do that, they're going to get killed on that by the defense. And so, look, I don't know what this guy is saying or what he claims he knows. I assume he's being whispered by friendlies from people who obsess over, and have this delusional hatred for Karen Reed, whether it's the police or others. But he doesn't have any legal training. He doesn't have any analytical training. He doesn't, and I don't even mean that disrespectfully, notwithstanding how disrespectful he has been probably to you and me about how dumb we all are and how smart he is. I don't care about that. The point is, I'm just here to tell you, and you can take it at face value or not. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about criminal procedure and how trials are conducted. That's just a fact. So whatever. But unless they get somebody who can go toe to toe on resume with the ARCA people and very methodically explain why they're wrong and I'm right, they don't have a shot. And what they can't do is have somebody who kind of cancels out the ARCA guys, because they have the burden of proof. And if the defense has any ability to say, well, it could be this, and they can't rebut it, then the defense wins. That's how trials work. And you're never going to get 12 out of 12. So this is all, again, just going back to shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. None of this is going to matter. Half the state police witnesses that they want to call have already been damaged much worse than they were before that trial started. Now their cell phone guy has not officially, he's not officially the subject of any IAB or anything, but he's probably the subject of something worse, which is a heavily scrutinizing federal criminal investigation that is attempting to determine whether he's part of some conspiracy to fudge data to help a cop. Now, I don't know that that's the case. In all fairness, I have no idea whether there's any actual evidence of, whether Guarino did anything improper or not. But if you don't think that the federal investigators are sitting there saying, how the hell did this guy miss 33,000 messages and miss all the messages from Jennifer McCabe that were favorable to Karen Reed? Of course they're looking into that. Of course they're going to look into that. And if, and like you said, people are going to start talking, okay? A guy was arrested and indicted, and at least for now is facing the death penalty. Again, I don't think that's realistic to believe it's going to happen, but needless to say, we're talking about the rest of your life in prison and others who wouldn't be facing the same sentence, but dealing with a lot of trouble. And the feds have announced that they're on the scene in the loudest way possible. We just indicted someone for killing an innocent girl and soon to be killing her unborn baby as well. And the last point on this, which I think is important, about not listening to people who have no experience in how federal criminal procedure works and how the U.S. attorney works and how federal grand juries work. You are being foolish if you assume that because there have not been charges in, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months, that is somehow, excuse me, a guarantee that it's over. Look how long they were on this Birchmore thing. Okay. Long time. Now, I don't know whether it started with Sandra Burchmore and that's how the Karen Reed stuff came in, but the fact that the feds, witnesses testified in a grand jury, at least as it related to the Karen Reed thing, that the feds are in the Birchmore thing. And what that tells me emphatically, and I have no idea whether anyone's getting charged in connection with goings on as it relates to Karen Reed, but understand something else. Farwell has nothing to do with Karen Reed. Okay.
Correct.
Totally separate thread.
Absolutely different. Yeah.
What you look at, though, that the feds had witnesses come in as it relates to Karen Reed. They had witnesses that came in as it relates to Sandra Burchmore. Those are not two separate things. Okay. There's something larger being looked at. And what you have to look at in between the two cases is kind of like the Venn diagrams. What's the overlap, right? And the overlap is the Canton Police Department, the Massachusetts State Police, and the Norfolk County DA. Okay. I would be pooping bricks if I were anyone involved in this stuff from any of those three agencies, that the feds are looking through your dirty laundry. And again, that doesn't mean anyone gets charged. Doesn't mean there's any evidence to support anything further. But the last thing you want is, an official corruption unit of a U.S. attorney's office investigating what you're doing and looking under everything. And, again, you take a guy like Guarino, he went 0 for 2 in the cell phone extractions in these two cases. And both of them inured to the benefit of law enforcement. In the Karen Reed case, it inured to the benefit of not, like the Alberts and whatever, they're different jurisdiction, but friendlies of cops. And of course, in the Birchmore investigation, it inured directly to the benefit of now the accused killer. So I would think that anyone, whether they live in an attic or elsewhere, who's telling you there is no federal investigation because, nothing has happened, at least hear that from somebody with a little more experience in the law than people like that. That's all.
Absolutely. And Mr. Bederow, I just wanted to, I know that you have a 4 o'clock stream, so I'm sure that you need a couple minutes to, shake it up because I've kept you for an hour and a half, but I just wanted to thank just a little roll the neck, refill that drink. And then you are going to be hopping on with Broken Baker. Right. And Broken Baker and Mike Crawford from the Young Jerks, and maybe others are going to be on Broken Baker's channel on YouTube, guys. And that's at 4 o'clock with the incomparable and our favorite ever LawTube man of the century. Okay. He comes back from vacation and he jumps right back in with us on Labor Day weekend. And I just want to remind everybody, Mark Bederow picked me first to be on today.
It's not a big deal that it's Labor Day weekend. I mean, in all fairness, I just spent 2 weeks, 24 hours a day with my family. So I think they're probably encouraging that I do some of this, alone time today.
Stay in the office, Dad. Yeah.
Yeah. You and the dogs go do your thing today and we'll do ours.
Can we have a doggy sighting before you bid me adieu?
Lola is on the couch. I actually tried to pull her up a little bit. Some of you may have heard some snarling. She was, well, you know what? When they come home from their, 2 weeks in doggy daycare, it usually takes about 2 or 3 days. They are just like out of it. I mean, they are completely comatose because they're so tired. So I think she got a little moody.
Did she have so much fun? Do you get reports at my doggy daycare for Keno? We get reports of daily pitches.
I'm not like that. I used to be like that and would pay extra for the daily. And no, and I'm not that. I've learned to not do that. But no, they come back and you can just see how happy they are and lying down at home next to each other and that kind of stuff.
Nothing better.
Yeah, no, it's the best part of vacation.
Place like home, right? They say.
Picking up the dogs is the best part about vacation, in my view.
Always. Yeah. Hi, Bubbles. You want to come here? You come here, Bubbles. Look at everybody. If you care to meet Keno, look at puppy. Come here, Mister. Turn. Oh, he's gonna be fresh. There's the Bubbles. Hi.
Look at that guy.
Keno. He is a Shiba Inu.
Yeah.
He's a good boy. Okay. Thank you.
I should. If I turn my screen, can you see her on the couch, or is she over there?
Yes, we see her. Hi, Lola.
Yeah. Oh, her ears just popped up when she's like, "What do you?"
It's a Nurse Kim voice that couldn't do that. Sorry if I hurt anyone. Oh my gosh. Well, again, Mr. Bederow, I appreciate everything about you. You know that. Thank you so much for your time, as always, and for being available for us all, our whole community, and for, in pursuit of justice, as always. And if you do happen to have a small amount of time in the future, I would love to talk to you about Molly Bish and Heather Bish.
I would. And beyond that, I'll be in Massachusetts in late September for court appearances anyway. So
potentially we could do an IRL, like an in real life stream. Dare we? I don't know.
Time permit.
I shall be there. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bederow, and I wish you a wonderful next stream, and I'll be watching.
See you later. Bye.
Bye. Guys, we did it. Nope, I'm still, my children are talking to me now, guys. So, listen, I just wanted to thank you all for tuning in with me today. And, Mr. Bederow just has a way of breaking things down and discussing things, in my opinion, that is not only palatable for us, but is so informative, guys. And I thank him deeply, for spending the time that he has with all of us. And thank you for spending your time with me. And the only other thing I wanted to say was, let's just punch a proctor. And also guys, I love you so much. I don't know how to do the super chats well. And if the chat moves too quick, I'm going to write you a love letter. I love you. I love your face. I love everything about you. And I'm so sorry that I don't say specifically like other creators. Like, I'm going to have to get better at that. I really, really apologize. But I'm going to work on it. I promise. But I will send you a note that says, thank you so very much from me. And I think the world of you guys. You're my lovies. And I know that together we are making a small impact, right? Just by keeping our names and keeping the names of Sandra Burchmore, of Officer John O'Keefe, of Karen Reed, and of Molly Bish, and so many others. We are just trying to help be a support for families and in the name of justice. I wish you an awesome rest of your day. I love your face. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.